They called her Miss Ruth. They called him Papa Shawn. Shortly after the turn of the century, the creations of Ruth Saint-Denis pioneered a new style of interpretive dance in America. In the 1930s, Ted Shawn revolutionized the role of men in American dance and founded Jacob's Pillow. In the years between, they merged both their names and their lives to create that unique era of dance known as Denishawn.
My best recollection from childhood? Probably my best recollection is the swing that hung by the old red barn. I was raised on a farm, you know, near Somerville, New Jersey. Our family's name was Dennis then, with 2 N's. And there were just the 4 of us. Mother, father, and my younger brother, Buzz. Oh, how I loved that farm. But this swing was positioned so it looked out over the valley. And I had a ritual where I would swing high into the upper branches of the trees and then swoop out over the world. I'll never forget it. I was free like a bird or a cloud in the wind. Of course, I always had to come back to earth again. That's the law, you know. Something I did not learn until many years later. Actually, I danced very little as a child. Mother, who liked to dabble in new ideas, introduced me to the Delsart exercises. And for a short time, I attended dance school in Somerville. But it was not until I saw the great Genevieve Stebbins dance, who incidentally predates both Isadora Duncan and myself, that I began to consider dance as something special. Of course, Mother sensed my interest right away and scheduled tryouts in New York. One small dancing job was at the infamous Worth's Museum. In those times, I did little more than kick my leg up and touch my knee to my nose. When I was a teenager, we moved to Brooklyn. With Mother's urging and help, I received a small role in a show called The Ballet Girl. Lord knows why they hired me. I don't think I ever showed much promise as an actress. But one thing led to another, and soon I found myself in David Belasco's production of Zaza. Working with D.B., what a fabulous opportunity. He was one of the greatest showmen that ever lived. By now, it was 1904. I was 25 and touring America in Belasco's Madame du Barry. I was enjoying theater, but at the same time, there was an awful restlessness within me. Nothing in my life seemed resolved. That feeling ended abruptly one day in Buffalo. My best friend Patty and I had stopped by a drugstore for a soda. While sipping our drinks, I noticed this large cigarette advertisement for a brand called Egyptian Deities. Almost instantly, I found myself being transported into the world of ancient Egypt. Most of all, I identified with the figure of Isis, who was seated at the center of the person. And in that moment, my destiny as a dancer sprang to life. I would become a rhythmic instrument of spiritual revelation. Never before had I known such a feeling. In an attempt to explain all this to my friend, I said, "No, Patty, I'm not going to be just an Egyptian dancer. I'm going to be Egypt." Once back in New York, I left Madame du Barry so that I could immerse myself in the study of Egyptian culture. Soon Mother became involved, and together we set about finding ways to produce Egypta. But about this time, I happened to visit an authentic East Indian village that was on display at Coney Island. I was so impressed that I decided to shift my attentions from Egypt to India. This completed the final step of my journey. Inspired by a spiritual vision of India, I created 3 of my best remembered dances: Radha, Cobra, and the Incense. So, here I was, in charge of a theater company, complete with stage scenery, costumes, and Hindus. So at this point, my evening of Indian dance was ready for an audience. But because we had no backing, there was no place to play. Enter a savior, a gentleman producer named Henry Harris, who graciously made arrangements for an invitational preview to take place at his Hudson Theater. Well, that night, March 22nd, 1906, we were a smash. John Corbin, the New York critic, wrote, "Miss Ruth Saint-Denis presented the fine art of dancing at its purest form." By May, I found myself sailing off on a 3-year tour of Europe. Everything there happened so quickly. First, there was a command performance for the King of England. Then came a reception in Paris that opened up the rest of Europe for me. Soon I found myself traveling from capital to capital, performing for dukes, princesses, and kings. My 3 years in Europe were without doubt the happiest days of my life. I was an active artist at the very peak of my creativity. Wherever I went, I was received by an adoring public, eager to see me dance. It was an atmosphere that appeared to have no limitations. And as a result, I saw only possibilities. Possibilities that I eagerly turned into new dances, like yogi and the first of my Indian nautch dances. Eventually, Europe had to come to an end. I was, after all, an American, and I wanted to bring my newly won recognition back to my own country. So, in the fall of 1909, I decided to come home. In leaving, I was well aware that America would never offer me the kind of support and attention I'd received while in Europe. And this cast me into quite a depression. So, here I was back in America, limited in opportunity, and not at all sure what my next steps were going to be. Into all this confusion entered a young man named Ted Shawn.
I first met Ruth Saint-Denis when I was invited to a studio for what I thought was a dancing lesson. It turned out instead to be an audition for her new touring company. Now, you see, at that time, I had seen Ruth perform only once. And that was back when I was a student in Denver. Now, as I recall, after the audition, Ruth and I must have talked and talked until midnight. On tour, we talked dance all hours of the night and day. It never let up. She became quite an obsession for me. I wrote her poems, took her for long walks. I spent every moment I could with her. And when the tour ended, well, I insisted we be married. I could see no other alternative. Not for us. Not for our dance. But how does one coax a free spirit like Ruthie into making such a traditional commitment?
I loved and wanted Ted very much. But the image of marriage struck such terror in me. As it turned out, we probably should have remained only lovers and allowed our passions to run their course. But this was 1914, and in those days, it was considered horrid and cheap to live together and not be married. So, on August 13th, 1914, Ted and I were married. And though it may not have been the best for either of us, it turned out to be a wonderful marriage for Dan's. First child became Denishawn.
The Denishawn system. Well, actually, there was no system as such. You see, dance, it's too big to be encompassed by any one system. Of course, we taught basic dance techniques, but our pupils were encouraged to experiment and to find their own way. We only supplied the food for the dancer. And once consumed, their individual interests dictated their dancing directions.
Oh, Ted was the driving force at our Denishawn school in California. There's no question about that. From first to last, his conceptual and organizational abilities were infinitely stronger than mine. Papa, as he was called by his students, was a brilliant instructor. He taught with great clarity. Whenever he explained a move or an idea to a young dancer, they understood right away. In contrast, I was never very good at teaching. My job was to supply atmosphere and inspiration. And believe me, Miss Ruth could inspire like hell.
But you see, Denishawn was more than a school. It was also the name for a performing company. course, today, you look at an early Denishawn playbill, the company names read like a who's who in American dance. Among others, we had Martha Graham, Charles Weidman, and Doris Humphrey. They were all great dancers, and destined to become even greater teachers and choreographers. We toured. We did vaudeville. We also produced spectaculars, like the dance pageant of 1916. Now that we staged at the Greek Theater in Berkeley.
Oh, the Greek theater show was an immense undertaking. We had over 100 dancers. In order to prepare the needed sets and costumes and props, we had to transport the entire Denishawn school to Berkeley. I'm particularly fond of this production because it was here that Ted and I first presented Tillers of the Soil, a piece many believe to be our finest duet. But like many of our dance extravaganzas, the Greek theater show was much too expensive. And even though 10,000 people attended, we lost money. So it was back to vaudeville.
Oh, no. We didn't particularly like vaudeville. But in order to survive, we had to adapt our choreography to the marketplace. Sure, vaudeville certainly would have been a lot easier for us if we'd been a tap dancing troupe. But we were something totally new. Something no one had ever seen before. Many Denishawn dances revealed my fascination with classic themes. And probably the most obvious is my interpretation of Adonis in Adagio Pathetique.
Certain dances of mine were called music visualization, where my actions were translated directly into the music's structure. My Brahms waltz and Liebestraum were such music visualizations. So were my Schubert waltzes. The creative work I did during the Denishawn years was, with a few exceptions, of lesser quality than I had done before on my own. I'm not saying this was Ted's fault. No one's life is anyone else's fault. I alone bear the blame for my lack of fulfillment at Denishawn. I was obstinate and difficult. I wore everyone out with my inconsistencies, caused real suffering, both emotional and financial. By 1922, everyone was running out of patience. Had it not been for the Daniel Mayer tours, Denishawn would probably have made an early exit into dance history right then and there.
Well, our 3-year contract with Mayer made Denishawn a household word. We played hundreds of cities, both big and small, and I mean small, like Altoona, Zanesville, and Saginaw. Now, because of the constant travel, it became difficult to even remember where we were. Now, here's a story. One morning, Ruth and I decided to go shopping. As we started down the street, Ruth asked, "What time is this?" I had to tell her I honestly did not know. "Wait," I said, "I have a route list in my pocket. Now, what's the date?" Ruth thought for a moment. "I have no idea." Well, we finally decided to ask a policeman. So I hope you will understand when I tell you that much of what happened during those years is a blur. But no sooner did we finish this contract than Mayer takes us aside and tells us, "Folks, put your traveling clothes back on. I have just booked you into a year-long tour of the Orient."
Well, when I first heard about the tour, I was overjoyed. But then a deeper part of me became quite depressed. You see, I had always hoped to visit the Orient alone. I did not want to drag along an entire dance company, nor did I want to be inconvenienced by the drudgery of a performance schedule. But of course, I soon set these negative feelings aside and became most enthusiastic. Where did we go? Japan, China, Burma, Indochina, and of course India. For so long I had dreamed of seeing India. Now it was actually going to happen. How were we received? Well, at first there were doubts about our stature as artists. After all, Americans were better known then for their automobiles and electric lights than they were for their art. But our performances changed that perception. My notch dancing was very popular, especially in India, where to our surprise we discovered that this form of traditional dancing had nearly died out. But thanks to our visit, the Indian notch dance has enjoyed quite a resurgence. My role in this rejuvenation, by the way, is something I am very proud of.
Wherever we went, I took time to observe native dancing. Now, remember, this was 1925, when the Orient was still untouched by modern life. So we saw many dances performed, much as they had been for hundreds of years. Well, I was fascinated and took endless pages of notes. Also, with the help of Ruth's brother, Buzz, we photographed many of these ancient dances on motion picture film. After returning from the Orient, we immediately set off on yet another tour of America. It was here that Ruth premiered her statue dance, White Jade, which was inspired by a visit to the Altar of Heaven in Peking. Now, I do recall while in India, I created a statue dance of my own called the Cosmic Dance of Shiva. It turned out to be one of the most popular pieces I've ever performed.
For some time now, the walls of Denishawn had been crumbling. Its 4 pillars, Martha Graham, Charles Weidman, Doris Humphrey, and our wonderful music director, Louis Horst, had all left by now. And the rift between Ted and me was growing wider each day. Oh, to the public, however, there was no hint of decline. In 1927, we staged a landmark performance at Carnegie Hall. But it was there that I did an unforgivable thing. After the final curtain, I stepped out on the stage alone and expressed my thanks to the audience for supporting me and my dream of Denishawn. Never once during the speech did I mention Ted. Backstage after the show, he was hurt and furious. I felt terrible, but the damage was done. Now, it would be only a matter of time before both our marriage and Denishawn would be over.
Well, I had reached a certain limit with Ruth that she would not allow me to go beyond. From the very beginning, she viewed both myself and my dance as subservient to her creative needs. So no matter what I tried, no matter what I accomplished, I was never able to elevate myself above that position. Now, eventually, one dark night in the fall of 1932, Ruth and I understood that our time together had come to an end. So, that evening, we gathered all the costumes, sets, props, and everything else that represented our partnership, stacked them in a great pile behind Denishawn House, and set them afire. By morning, there was nothing left to the years but a pile of smoke and ash. Denishawn had come to an end.
How would I describe Ted Shawn? Ted Shawn is a man of great dedication, splendid intelligence, and an unusual amount of individual strength. In my life, I have never known a dancer who balances the physical, emotional, and spiritual elements of life to the remarkable degree that he does. He is, of course, the most important man in American dance. 3 times he has made major contributions. First, his years as a dancer in Denishawn. Second, his fight for the role of the male dancer in America. And third, the founding of Jacob's Pillow, America's unique center for dance. To have achieved any one of these would have been the work of a great man. To have done all 3 is the work of a genius. Well, he is a genius. He married me, didn't he?
Shortly after I married Ruth, I put together a book on her early life as a dancer. I called it Ruth Saint-Denis, Pioneer and Prophet. There are still no better words to define her place in dance history. As a pioneer, she was the first to bring classic dance into the popular arena. And as a prophet, she was among the first to perceive dance as an expression of man's eternal spirit. It is also important to note that Ruth is more a product of the theater than she is of the dance studio. And as such, she brought a vivid new look to the way dance is staged in our country. Now, often you hear Ruth referred to as America's mother of modern dance. Well, actually, she's not a modern dancer at all. She's an interpretive dancer, dedicated to the belief that behind each physical gesture lies an emotional or spiritual motivation. Spiritual. Now that's Ruthie, all right. All her life she has searched for some way to merge herself with the divine. I don't know why. She's already divine. Just ask anybody who has seen her dance and they will tell you. Ruth Saint-Denis is a goddess. In 1964, friends of ours began to realize that Ruth and I had been married for almost 50 years. 50 years! Can you imagine? You know, we were never divorced. Soon they began to talk about having a special 50th wedding anniversary for us at Jacob's Pillow. So I said, okay, if it's such a big deal, let's celebrate. So we did. And it turned out to be a wonderful day for both of us, filled with friends and memories. And I thought about all the years that had gone by, and of all that Ruth and I had accomplished. Most of all, my thoughts drifted back to our first Denishawn school. To Martha, Charles, and Doris, and to all the wonderful young people that we introduced to our fresh new view of dance. And I thought, well, Miss Ruth, you know, it wasn't easy for either of us. Often you were impossible, and most of the time I was a pain in the neck. But we didn't do too badly, did we? No, not too badly at all.
In August of 1964, while celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, Ruth Saint-Denis and Ted Shawn danced together for the last time. The dance they chose was 𝒕𝒂𝒄𝒂 of the upper air, a dance based on an Indian legend of two spirits forever in motion together. In 1968, Ruth Saint-Denis died at the age of 90. 4 years later, Ted joined her at the age of 81. Only with their death did the Denishawn era truly come to an end.